How's it going, guys? White Rabbit here. I'd like to talk to you all today about a movie franchise called Transformers. Now, if you're not familiar, Transformers is loosely based on an old toy line from Hasbro, which also had a television show and comics that were popular with kids in the mid-80s and early 90s. Now, this should be of some particular importance to you because what I'm actually going to be talking about today is the symbolism in that movie. And guys, I gotta tell you, there are some serious underlying messages being thrown out in this series. Now, the interesting thing to note about this movie is its mass appeal. Not only does it appeal to kids with its cartoon-based origins, but in addition to that, it also appeals to an older generation who grew up with these cartoons. And you'll see that this is becoming a common trend among Hollywood films, where they take something that is typically associated with children and they kind of muck it up a bit, give it a little bit of a darker feel to it, so that it also appeals to an older audience. Now, this is not only to get more bang for their buck and to increase their revenue and sales, but it's also so that they can send their subliminal messages to a wider audience. So right off the bat, when we're talking about a major Hollywood blockbuster film that does appeal to a wide audience as Transformers does, and has the budget that Transformers had, you can rest assured that it will be chock full of propaganda for the masses to digest. Now, before going any further, I truly must insist that if you have not watched a couple of my earlier videos before stumbling upon this one, that you go back and first go and watch a couple of my previous videos. If you watch the video I did called Who Killed Kennedy and the video called Saturn Symbolism, this video will make much more sense to you. So please, if you haven't already watched at least those two other videos that I've done, please stop this video right here and go watch those videos first. And it might not be a bad idea to make sure that you watch the one I did about Katy Perry first, too. With that said, let's get into it. Now, first, I just want to play for you a quick segment from the original cartoon that you might find amusing.
Transformers, more than meets the eye. Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. The Transformers. Robots in disguise. The Transformers. More than meets the eye. The Transformers.
Now, the reason I wanted to start off by showing you guys that clip is to allow you to listen to the lyrics of the original theme song. The lyrics say, Transformers more than meets the eye. And that is a key phrase. Not only is there eye symbolism there in the whole Eye of Horus, but more than that, they're telling you right off the bat that there's more to this cartoon than just the cartoon. And then when they go on to say robots in disguise, that's kind of a clue for you. And what I'm getting at here is there's actually an exoteric and an esoteric meaning behind Transformers that is almost overwhelming in the movie series, but is also apparent in the original cartoon itself. Now, when people use the term exoteric and esoteric, I want to make sure that you guys understand what I'm saying. When I describe something as being exoteric, what exoteric actually means is something that is intended for or likely to be understood by the general public. And when we're talking about movies and other symbols and structures all over the place that the occult often use, there's both the obvious meaning and there's also a hidden meaning. And when I use the term esoteric, what that term actually means is something that is intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. So when I say that Transformers, both the cartoon and the movies, have both an exoteric and an esoteric meaning to it, what I'm saying is you can't take these things at face value. And what you see on the surface, what is obvious to the general public, is not actually what is being represented or the real meaning that is behind it. And as you guys know, the occult love to pull things over on us. And so, in terms of Transformers, what we're actually talking about and the actual agendas that are being pushed are fallen angels, Saturn worship, and a few other little occult agendas that I'll get into as we go along. But those are the two main ones. These Transformers actually represent fallen angels, which the occult want us to believe are actually aliens, but that's, a whole nother video entirely. And Saturn worship, where, as you've seen in my previous video, ultimately comes back to worshiping Satan. So, just to prove my point to you guys that the cartoon itself also had these hidden meanings to them, I'll play for you another opening sequence for the same cartoon that came out a little bit later. So let's break that opening sequence down a little bit so that you guys who are still a little novice to this stuff can understand what I'm actually talking about. First, they start off right off the bat with Saturn. I mean, they just flat out show it on the screen, Saturn. There you go. But as you go on, and as the beginning sequence continues, it becomes even more obvious. And it starts to be a little more obvious when the train goes off the side of the cliff into what appears to be a pool of lava, and what that can actually represent in a way is actually hell. But even more than that, after that, it shows the screen as almost a digital reality, and it is an artistic, if you will, representation of the Matrix, which, as you know, is what Saturn represents. It represents the cube, it represents the prison of this dimension, space, time, and matter. It represents the flesh. I mean, all these different things, but it represents the Matrix. And then it even more so, goes into this wormhole type configuration, which of course is the ultimate agenda, is to create a link between this dimension and the next. That's, their agenda. And you can go through and look at all the different opening sequences that there have ever been for this cartoon, and you can find all kinds of different hidden little meanings and symbolism that lead back to the occult and to Saturn's symbolism. So, I mean, it's pretty clear to me that from the very get-go, there has been an intimate relationship between Transformers and the occult. And so to me, it makes sense that their motto and their theme song says, "More than meets the eye." And yeah, the exoteric meaning to that is because they transform, so, they're not just a car, they're actually a robot. But the esoteric meaning behind that is much more devious, and is actually referring to these Transformers representing fallen angels, and all having to do with Saturn worship. So let's move our attention now to the real topic at hand and discuss the exoteric and the esoteric meaning in the Transformer movies. And, when I first started to uncover this, it's so daunting and so overwhelming that I almost don't even know where to start. So I'm actually going to just go in chronological order of the movies and hopefully fill in pieces along the way. So bear with me if I kind of jump around a little bit, but I think this will be the most effective way of getting my point across. So here we go. So if we look at the original Transformers movie that came out in 2007 starring Shia LaBeouf, it's actually an introduction to these fallen angel machine beings, and even more so really, an introduction to this cube/Saturn worship. And of course they packaged this movie again as a lighthearted kids film, but also gritty and dirty enough for teenagers and adults to enjoy as well. And just like, any other Hollywood film that has an agenda that it's pushing, they show you in the previews for this film some very key elements that explain what this movie is really about.
It's a mystical bond between man and machine.
And as you can see right there in the trailer, they specifically chose that line because it perfectly illustrates the overarching agenda being perpetuated all throughout the series. He says there is a mystical bond between man and machine.
It's a mystical bond between man and machine.
And that takes you to the element of transcendence. In other words, creating a forgery of what God did for us, creating life without God, or extending life without God, which is one way that the occult or the elite believe that they can ascend beyond this cube, beyond this dimension. And if you don't believe me, just look at the numerology that comes right after it, that literally flashes on the screen. It's a 9 and 11. Not only that, but it shows the dial moving from the 9 to the 11. And as we talked about in that Saturn video I did, that is the ultimate numerology to express that whole idea, that whole moving beyond the cube, if you will, attempting to outperform God. Then, as the trailer continues, you see the scene that illustrates these supposed aliens falling to Earth as meteors. And again, that just goes back to the whole idea of fallen angels, where they were stars that fell to Earth and were cast out of heaven. Now, if we jump to the actual movie, it starts off with some of the most blatant and extreme Saturn symbolism that you're probably ever going to come across.
Before time began, there was the cube.
Not only does the movie begin by showing this cube floating through outer space, but it is also, from the very beginning of the movie, associated with time. And if you guys know anything about Saturn, I mean, even on a basic understanding, on a basic level, you know that Saturn is deeply and intimately connected with time. Now, also, just to point out some other additional bonus examples of symbolism that are present in this movie, you can see here Shia LaBeouf's character is holding up a pair of his grandfather's glasses right in front of one eye, and you have the one eye symbolism. And then again, you can see the shirt that he is wearing has an alien on it with one eye. So we have the Eye of Horus, one eye symbolism, the third eye being represented, and also intermingling into, subliminally, alien life, because, that's the agenda. They want you to believe that fallen angels are actually aliens. And that's one of the agendas of this movie.
So, what was that last night? What was that?
Message from Starfleet.
Throughout the inanimate vastness of
Rain
space.
down like visitors from heaven, hallelujah.
Visitors from heaven, what? What are you, like an alien or something?
Visitors from heaven, hallelujah.
Visitors from heaven, what?
Visitors from heaven, hallelujah.
Visitors from heaven, what? What are you, like an alien or something?
And a little later in the film, when you see him sitting in his car, you see a lion on his dash, and that's not on accident, guys, but I'll get more into that a little later. Then we have a scene at another point in the movie where one of the Transformers is shown standing next to what appears to be almost a pyramid-type structure, but is shooting a beam of light up into the sky, which is another subliminal that represents ascension. And who can forget the subliminal of the police car that says "to punish and enslave" on the side of it? Now, just as before I was talking about the subliminal of Shia LaBeouf's character's shirt, the second shirt that he wears in the film also has a subliminal to it. And not only does the shirt itself look similar to Saturn, with Saturn's rings, but it also has a band's name on it, The Strokes. And the subliminal that they're putting in that instance has to do with the undertones of lust that are predominant all throughout this film.
Were you masturbating?
Judy. Was I No, Mom.
But okay.
No, I don't masturbate.
That's not something for you to bring up. That's a father and son thing.
I mean, you don't have to call it that word. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can call it Sam's happy time or my special alone time.
Mom,
with
Judy.
myself.
Stop.
I'm sorry. It's just been a weird night. I've had a little bit to drink.
No, Dad.
Yeah, well,
It's not just about laughs, folks. It's about consciously and subconsciously embedding lust into your mind.
I love you. God, I love you. Just so much right now. All right, I love you. Sleep good, handsome man.
And you'll see as the series progresses, they subtly try and intermingle this theme of lust in with these robot aliens and with technology.
I just wanted to show him my cannons. Our medical officer, Ratchet. The boy's pheromone levels suggest he wants to mate with the female.
Now, jumping back to the esoteric symbolism of fallen angels present throughout this movie, we can see in this scene when Optimus Prime is describing his home planet, the imagery would lead one to conclude that they're actually saying they're from hell.
Our planet was once a powerful empire.
Now, they also hint later in the movie of something that many conspiracy theorists have theorized for quite some time, which is that certain technologies have actually come from knowledge from fallen angels. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting that they include a little Easter egg about that in the movie here.
You're looking at the source of the modern age. The microchip, lasers, spaceflight, cars, all reverse engineered by studying him.
And this is all quickly followed up by referencing the cube and associating this alien robot / fallen angel to essentially the Grim Reaper, which, as you guys know, is another association with Saturn.
So why Earth?
It's the Allspark.
Allspark? What is that?
Well, yeah, they came here looking for some sort of cube-looking thing. Anyway, Mr. NBE-1 here, a.k.a. Megatron, that's what they call him, he's pretty much the harbinger of death, wants to use the cube to transform human technology to take over the universe.
And that, folks, is essentially exactly what is trying to be done in reality.
You guys know where it is, don't you?
And then, of course, they reinforce the fiction that is carbon dating.
Carbon dating puts the cube here around 10,000 BC.
And then they subliminally throw in an association to hieroglyphics and aliens.
They knew it was alien because of the matching hieroglyphics on the cube as well as NB1.
And you guys have to understand that it's little subliminal things like that that over time, when enough of these movies do things like that, that begin to change the views of society. You know, and they also have shows like Ancient Aliens, which I used to watch all the time, but they do things like that so that you think that all these things are in the past are actually talking about aliens, when in reality they're talking about fallen angels. But if we jump back to this scene that I was talking about, you can again see how they are incorporating this cube into the forefront of people's minds. And again, what this cube actually represents is Saturn. It's one of the most blatant representations of Saturn worship that you will ever find. And all throughout this movie, especially towards the end of the movie, it becomes about, protecting this cube and not letting the cube fall into the wrong hands, sort of thing. Which then leads us to an interesting series of events that is just so incredibly symbolic for the occult. I almost couldn't believe it when I first saw it. But in this scene, what they're showing us, as you see Shia LaBeouf's character running towards this light, this doorway that's in front of him, you can see the pillars on either side and the light shining through the doorway. And this is the exact same thing that the Freemasons believe in. And if you look at their symbolism and all the things that they believe in, it's the exact same thing. Not only that, but right after he goes through this passageway, he goes up stairs. He is ascending to the next level with the cube. Do you see the symbolism there? And not only that, but when he reaches the pinnacle, when he reaches the top, the roof of this building, he is carrying the torch. He is burning the eternal flame. Okay, so what does the flame represent? The flame is another representation for Prometheus. Now, who was Prometheus? He was the Titan god of forethought and crafty counsel who was entrusted with the task of molding mankind out of clay. His attempts to better the lives of his creation brought him into direct conflict with Zeus. This is because, to make a long story short, Prometheus gave man fire, at least in the old Greek mythology. And because of this, and because he angered Zeus, Zeus then went and created Pandora and her box. Now, if you remember the video that I recently also did about the movie Avatar and the symbolism with Pandora, you can see how that also relates back to Saturn. But it's interesting that we have this torch in this scene. In addition to the box, we have two things that not only represent Saturn, but also represent Prometheus, who was entrusted with the task of molding mankind out of clay. Now, this is important because we're getting the symbolism and the symbology of mankind and the knowledge that they were not intended to possess alongside the cube, which is the prison that our original sin has trapped us all in, the sin of the flesh, the prison of the flesh, the prison of time, space, and matter of this dimension. This is all extremely symbolic to the occult, guys. And then, if you guys still aren't getting it, just a few minutes later into the movie, this cube actually turns into a flame. It turns into this bolt, this jolt, this flame of energy. The actual cube becomes the light and is injected and infused into the heart of this fallen angel, or this Decepticon. And that's another thing. The bad guys in this movie are called Decepticon, as in deception, as in Transformers are nothing but deception. Alright, let's move on to the next one. Alright, so the second Transformers movie that came out was called Revenge of the Fallen. I mean, how much more obvious can you get that they're talking about fallen angels here? But anyway, I digress. I'm going to play for you the beginning of the second movie here, and I want you to keep a few things in mind. First, I want you to keep in mind that they are talking about fallen angels that came to Earth as described in Genesis. Second, I want you to notice the unfinished pyramid symbolism. And third, I want you to also realize that they are pushing again this old Earth idea by saying that it took place supposedly in 17,000 BC.
For in our quest to protect the humans, a deeper revelation dawns. Our worlds have met before.
You see, when you put it in the perspective of fallen angels, it all starts to make a whole lot more sense.
This is not your planet to rule. The fallen shall rise again.
Now, just as the first movie, this movie also has some deep underlying meanings associated with lust. But the interesting about this one is they take it one step further, and they really push this whole intermingling between different life forms and machines. And they begin to push it almost as if it's towards bestiality.
Mojo, no dominating Frankie. Get the hell off the couch, you filthy beast.
Wow. I see a lot of that in college, too.
And then they move it more to technology.
Name's Wheelie. Yeah. Say my name. Say my name.
What are you allowing to happen to your foot just now?
At least he's faithful, Sam.
Yeah, well, he's faithful, and he's nude, and he's perverted.
And give off this feeling of lust towards technology, and subliminally creating a link between man and machine on a very physical level.
Sam?
Michaela.
Is that your girlfriend?
Uh-huh.
I also want you to notice how they tie in demonic possession into this scene as well, with this female who is actually a robot changing into her robot form really gives off the feeling of her being a demon or possessed. You know, when young teenagers come across this movie, quite frankly, they don't really care if she's turning into a demon-possessed robot or not. They're still going to be aroused by this half-naked chick, and they're still going to be persuaded with lustful feelings. And on a subconscious level, they're going to associate those lustful feelings with demonic possession and technology. This is a mind game, folks. And going along with the whole hijacking of one's thoughts and perspectives on certain things, we can see another agenda being pushed in this scene where they are mocking conspiracy theorists and truthers.
Like, looks fake to me. Dude, it's not fake. The internet's pure truth. Video doesn't lie.
It looks fake.
No, man, I've seen them. They're like these robots.
Look, it's fake. Anybody could do it on any computer, okay? And I wasn't there. So I can't comment or speculate.
Oh, no. Comment or speculate. And we're supposed to cohabitate? No, listen, okay? Don't be sucking the sack, bro.
Which sack?
The ball sack.
Dude, what kind of tool are you? Mainstream media sack. They're lying to us, all right? It's aliens, man.
Okay.
Alright, now switching gears a little bit, let's get back into the Saturn worship that takes place in this movie, and I want to show you this scene in particular, where the teacher at the head of this class giving this lecture actually represents Lucifer. And in several different points throughout all the other movies, there seems to be one character in particular who represents Lucifer. And again, we're talking about esoteric interpretations here. And in this scene, I believe the lecturer is actually representing Lucifer and or Kronos, which, as you guys know, is just another name for Saturn.
Space. Time. Gravity.
Finish that for me. We're going on a journey together, you and I, today. All you eager, nubile young minds on the very cusp of adulthood.
So why do I say this? Well, just look at the scene. He begins the scene by holding up this pocket watch, which represents time. And Kronos and Saturn also represent time. But not just that. He's also holding an apple. And the apple is generally related to the forbidden fruit from the Garden of Eden and the original sin, especially when he takes a bite out of it. Just like the Apple logo that we discussed in one of my previous videos. And when he drops the apple, yeah, I mean, that might be a cute little way to represent Isaac Newton discovering gravity. but that's the exoteric meaning. And we're talking about esoteric meaning here. And the esoteric meaning is the original sin. So we have the prison of time, accompanied with the forbidden fruit, representing the sin and the flesh that we are now trapped into. And that metaphor of the prison of the flesh is exaggerated when one of the students in the class picks up the apple, and there begins this whole sexual tension between her and the teacher for some reason. And that is comparable to Lucifer encouraging the mortal man to give in to lustful desires. So all these different things come back to it representing Kronos and Lucifer. The movie then tries to steer your attention away from the professor speaking, who represents Lucifer, and put it on the actual star of this movie, Shia LaBeouf, and what is going on with him. But I'm going to show you the scene, and I want you to continue to listen very carefully to what this professor is actually saying.
All you eager, nubile young minds on the very cusp of adulthood.
And I shall be your consort, your guide, your chaperone into the heart of darkness.
Welcome to Astronomy 101.
Then he goes on to explain that this is an Astronomy 101 class, which is significant in and of itself because he talks about the star constellations.
Well, what do we know about the stars? Virgo.
The Virgin.
Orion, the great hunter. These are no mere twinkling diamonds for lovely maidens to wish upon. No, they are dynamos filled with a throbbing, savage, and pent-up energy.
The significance of this on an esoteric level is huge in this movie. You have to remember that the stars tell the story of the Bible, but occultic groups have taken the stars and have twisted it in all kinds of different ways and have basically created pagan gods and other deities to worship from. He discusses Virgo, the Virgin, which is of course where this new world is birthed from. But then a little later in the movie, there's another scene that would seem unrelated, but has everything to do with the constellations and the coming Antichrist.
Lennox, I'm with the kid, you know? One with the attitude, right? We need the truck. We got a possible resurrection going on over here. You're not going to believe where we are. Code, Tut, as in King Tutankhamun. Back of a $1 bill. Coordinates for airdrop. 29.5 north, 34.88 east. Write it down. Oh my God. I gotta go. Okay. He's coming. Who are you? Wait, it's me. Leo.
Do you see the connection now? He's talking about a resurrection, and never mind the 666 symbolism in what he actually said.
We got a possible resurrection going on over here. You're not going to believe where we are. Code, Tut, as in King Tutankhamun. Back of a $1 bill.
But then this guy comes up yelling that his name is Leo. Now, do you still think it's an accident that there was a lion on the dashboard in the first movie? And you'll see all throughout this second movie especially, they continually reference sacrifices and resurrections. And you'll see when people hold their arms out at their sides, that is symbolic in the occult of representing Jesus on the cross. It's a mockery of Jesus Christ. And it actually can symbolize the Antichrist. Because remember, they're trying to create a forgery of what Jesus did. And that's what all of this is about.
Now I claim your son.
So now we know that there is all this symbolism in these Transformers movies about the coming Antichrist and of Saturn. And with the symbolism of resurrections and sacrifices, it becomes even more obvious that this is extremely occultist. So let's take that one step further and let's examine this scene. And I want you to again keep in mind the Saturn symbolism, which is blatant and obvious at the beginning of this scene, but also when these two robots are talking. And you'll see that at other various stages through the movie, there's going to be womb symbolism. And that again relates back to the astrological symbol of Virgo, the Virgin. Because remember, this whole Antichrist New World Order system has to be birthed from the womb.
Starscream, I'm home.
Lord Megatron, I was so relieved to hear of your resurrection.
You left me to die on that pathetic insect planet.
Only to help spawn our new army. The Fallen decrees it. After all, in your absence, someone had to take command.
So disappointing.
Fledglings, careful, fragile.
Even in death, there is no command but mine.
Now with that in mind, let's listen to what this three-eyed king robot, if you will, has to say about the cube.
You have much to learn, my disciple. The cube was merely a vessel. Its power, its knowledge can never be destroyed.
Folks, it's no accident that this robot, which happens to have 3 eyes, as in third eye symbolism, as in the mark of the beast, it's no accident that this robot has 3 eyes and is calling to his disciple. If you look up what the word disciple actually means, the primary definition of disciple is a follower of Christ. And when he calls this other robot his disciple, it is just more evidence that we are talking about Antichrist symbolism and occult symbolism and satanic symbolism. Now, when we're talking about all this satanic symbolism, and when I'm saying that this Antichrist New World Order system has to be birthed into existence, that's both literal and figuratively, but it's very significant to the occult. And it also pertains to the idea of the wormholes, or the gateways, or the stargates. They kind of go hand in hand. And when you see in this scene in the movie, they go through this portal and appear in the middle of this desert. Now, the significance of the desert is that it represents the barren land. And barren land, again, can be representatory of Saturn or hell, and basically represents where these fallen angels reside. And again, the Bible talks a lot about the barren wasteland, or, barren women before the harvest. And that's where a lot of this, symbolism comes from, by twisting around different verses in the Bible. Now again, they make this barren wasteland representation of Hades or hell even more obvious in one of the following scenes, where they essentially and metaphorically go through a tunnel where they are descending into the depths of hell. That's what this scene represents. And of course, while he's in there, what does he discover?
Matrix.
In the depths of hell, he uncovers the Matrix. Now, to finish out this movie, I'll just go ahead and throw out some other little symbology that popped out at me while watching it. Right here in this scene, you can see again this link that they want you to draw between ancient cultures and aliens instead of ancient cultures and fallen angels.
I think aliens built that.
And in the same scene, you can see them going through a doorway with 2 pillars on the side, which are those 2 statues, and on top of it, which is the symbol for Isis as representing the sun. So again, we have the Masonic pillars and sun symbolism in a doorway.
Follow us to the pillars. We'll take you to Optimus.
Now you have more symbolism going along these lines a little earlier in the movie, when they go into this secret bunker that this guy has, where they come down this ladder that is eerily similar to other Masonic symbolism, where again you have the ascension to the light. And again in this scene, just like the last one, they attempt to create this link between ancient artifacts and hieroglyphics to aliens instead of fallen angels.
Archaeologists found these unexplained markings in ancient ruins all over the world. China, Egypt, Greece. Shot in 1932. These are symbols you're seeing in your head? Same ones over here, right? So, tell me, how did they end up all drawing the same thing? Huh? Aliens. And I think some of them stayed.
Now I want to throw in this scene because it shows just how subtle they can be with this symbolism. You can see he is looking through not binoculars but a telescope with one eye, which represents, of course, the one eye symbolism, and then immediately flashes to the top of this pyramid, which is missing its capstone. Remind you of anything? And just for good measure, they go ahead and take more off the top of the pyramid later in the movie, just in case you didn't catch the symbolism there the first time. And yes, this movie is also riddled with keyhole symbolism, as well as an entire scene dedicated to Shia LaBeouf's character going to apparently robot heaven, which I could talk in length about. But for the purposes of this video, let's go ahead and move on to the next movie. Now, for those of you who have made it this far into my video, you're in for quite a treat, because the third movie is actually what inspired me to make this video. I actually saw one of the scenes on TV while flipping through the channels that was so blatantly obvious in representing this whole 9 and 11 transcendence, Stargate, Antichrist, what have you, that I was overwhelmed with the urge to share what I saw with you guys. But before I get into that scene in particular, there's a few other things I want to point out, so let's get into it. The first quick little thing I want to point out in this movie is right in the beginning, they push two well-known conspiracies. And it is my personal belief that they are doing this in a way to recondition the populace to believing the official story on this. And there's some more psychology that goes into that, but I'll just leave it at that. But the two things in particular that I'm talking about is they're specifically showing JFK. And yes, I know JFK had a lot to do with the space program, but he was also assassinated. And there's a big conspiracy around that, as I'm sure you guys are more than familiar with. But more so than that, they're pushing this whole "we went to the moon in 1969" thing. And I mean, some of you guys may believe that we actually went to the moon, but I'm here to tell you that we didn't. No man has ever stepped foot on the moon, and I'll let you do your own research on that. Maybe I'll put up a video in the future about it. I'll give you a hint. The smoking gun in that whole thing has to do with radiation, but anyway, it's interesting though that they're pushing, or at least showing, both JFK and going to the moon almost as if to entice anyone who's into conspiracies. But aside from the whole moon landing thing that they're trying to reaffirm in your minds, the fact that they're showing JFK in these fictional scenes and in a way giving him new life is something that the Illuminati and others of the like have really profited off of after the deaths of their puppets. I mean, we've seen it with Tupac and Michael Jackson and so on. Now, jumping ahead a little bit into this movie, I want to touch again on the lust undertones that are present throughout this movie. And I want to show you this scene in particular, because this is very telling that the occult and the Illuminati, if you will, have a huge foothold in this movie. And this is a clear example of that. Now, in the occult, and with several female actresses and singers and things, there are certain items and certain things that can tip you off to knowing that this actress or singer is an Illuminati puppet. And not only that, but also essentially a sex slave to the elite, and also a sex icon to the populace. And arguably the most significant symbol to represent that is a white rabbit. Now I know that my channel is called White Rabbit, but I assure you it's for different reasons. But nonetheless, you will repeatedly see a white rabbit commonly associated with women who are essentially sex icons and sex idols and sex slaves. Or in other words, you know, Illuminati puppets. I also talked about in that video I did about Katy Perry of the association with kittens and various types of cats, and how that too can represent what it's actually called a sex kitten programming, or a sex kitten slave, or sex kitten manipulation, whichever terminology you prefer. And again, it's the same thing, and it has to do with these women being puppets and essentially mind controlled when it gets down to it. And what this girl actually represents in this movie is obvious even on an exoteric level, and that is she is the sex icon all throughout this movie to create a lustful feeling among moviegoers. But when we throw in white rabbits and leopard print, it becomes obvious who's really in control of this movie and who's pulling the strings here. This is much more devious than you guys might think. Now again, in this next scene, you can see how they are using this lustful undertones and associating it with technology and machinery.
Take a look at this 1939 Delahaye 165 Cabriolet, designed by a Frenchman. Look at the curves. Elegant, isn't it? Beautiful. Sensual. Built to evoke the body of the ideal woman.
Now this brings me to my next point, and it is really the topic at hand when discussing this movie. The character that you see on the screen here, much like the professor in the second movie, actually represents Satan or Saturn. And I want you to just keep that in mind as we move forward.
It's beautiful in here, and he's the coolest guy ever.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Sam. Dylan Gould.
And in this scene, we can see a beautiful example of how Satan operates by bribing people into loving him.
You don't have a car.
Yes, I do.
Would you win it in a raffle?
He gave me one.
He gave you a car?
Yeah, I think it was a work perk.
Huh. Work perk.
Mercedes-Benz SLS.
You drove this year?
Breathtaking performance, clear craftsmanship in a gull-wing.
It's a $200,000 car.
Now keep in mind that that guy represents Satan or Saturn as we move forward with the common theme present throughout this movie, which has a lot to do with pillars.
We came under fire. The pillars. Where are the pillars? You saved 5 of them, including the control pillar. Only 5?
Alright, now enough beating around the bush. Let's get to the segment of the movie that I was talking about that is overly abundant with obvious satanic and occult symbolism.
Say what you said. Say it.
I will follow you to the end of time.
So this whole segment of the film begins with a metaphor for time and the end of time. And it's no coincidence when you see what's about to follow. Notice that these magical columns are being distributed in the middle of the pool that sits before the Washington Monument, which is, of course, as you guys know, represents Osiris and Isis, the church and the doctrine.
He was meant to rendezvous with me here on Earth before fate waylaid us both. The only way to revive him, we needed Prime and his Matrix.
Excellent strategy.
So not only are we getting pillars placed in an extremely symbolic place to the occult, but we have this sadistic symbolism of this evil fallen angel sitting on essentially the throne of the American government. And this could easily represent our nation being manipulated by fallen angels. Now what happens next is truly unbelievable.
Here we are. Fight us now.
directly in front of an extremely satanic memorial. A stargate opens up which connects this world to another. And this other world happens to be barren and empty. And from this world emerges from beneath the ground these giant alien robots or fallen angels. And they go through this portal and are transported to Earth. This is the exact same thing that I was talking about in my Saturn Symbolism 101 video, where they are trying to create a link between this dimension and the next. And the symbolism doesn't stop there, it continues into the very next scene. Remember, this character in the film represents Lucifer or Saturn. And when we find him in this scene, he is dining, almost as if he is having his last meal, the Last Supper. Remember, they're trying to create a forgery of what Jesus did during his life.
I'll tell you outside.
Really think I could help you, Sam? Remember a talk I had with my dad once about tough choices.
Yeah, now's not the time. We'll set something up, though.
Of course, that was way back when my dad's firm was in charge of budget review and accounting for NASA. You see, the thing that he taught me was, when it's not your war, you join the side that's going to win.
There you have it, guys. Saturn, the black star, or Lucifer, the light, standing between the two pillars. And just in case you're still not convinced that this character represents Saturn and or Satan, we'll fast forward here to a little bit further in the scene where he places the mark of the beast on Shia LaBeouf's character's arm.
Just do what he wants!
Yes, he will. They all do. They will slaughter her, do you understand me? In the time it takes you to blink, they will do it to her, and they will do it to me. So you show a little respect when someone offers you a job! Wrist. You are to track down Optimus Prime, because you're the one human he trusts, and you will ask one question. How does he intend to fight back? Strategies, tactics, everything. Has a nasty little bite, doesn't it? It's very high tech.
So there you have it, guys. We have all the components. We have this occult ritual which brings about this Stargate where these fallen angels emerge from the barren land and transport through the wormhole to this dimension. And we have Lucifer, or Satan, issuing the mark of the beast.
Years from now, they're going to ask us, where were you when they took over the planet? And we're going to say, we just stood by and watched.
But wait a minute, folks, the movie's not quite over yet. Towards the end of the movie, just in case you didn't catch on earlier, they go through this whole cycle all over again, where they combine the pillars and create this gateway, this Stargate, to another world, to another dimension. And what's interesting later on is that they actually use color symbolism in addition to the other Masonic and Satanic symbolism. And now, you know, I could make a whole nother video just as long as this one, just talking about the color symbolism and significance among all these Transformers movies.
Why is Chantel using what appears to be a red cup from the red floor when we are on the yellow floor?
I'm on it.
It is a visual and therefore a visceral betrayal.
But I'll spare you guys and just focus on this scene in particular, where we have the red and the blue pillar. And if you guys study the occult at all, you know that is very significant and very obvious. It basically just goes right back into the whole 9/11 symbolism and so on and so forth. And with the red and the blue pillar, we see them opening up this Stargate and an actual world merging with our own. Guys, they're shoving it right in your face. And the problem is, most people have no idea what they're actually watching. And that's why I'm talking a lot about this exoteric and esoteric meaning. These movies are really nothing more than propaganda for the elite to show to the masses. They're revealing their entire plan to you on an esoteric level. where it's subtle enough that most people won't catch on to it. But anyone with any serious background and understanding of these things would watch this and say, wait a minute, there's something seriously wrong with this picture. It's right there, guys, and it's the same old plan that they've had in the works for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And the veil is lifting. Alright, now let's move on to the last movie. Now this last movie is especially of interest because it takes this whole fallen angel and gateway/Stargate theme present throughout all the other movies and takes it one step further into the element of this transcendence idea. Remember, I mentioned earlier all throughout this video of how they were trying to associate lustful desires with machinery and technology, as well as even demonic possession. Well, this movie kind of ties that all together.
What was that sound?
That's the sound.
That you asked for.
No, I asked for boundless, transcendent. When you walk through a door in this building, it should sound like you've stepped into the future.
And remember, the way that they are planning on selling this to society is by saying that this is all an improvement, and that it's for the betterment of mankind, and that it is only through scientific discoveries and through technology that we will evolve to the next level.
Innovation. What we do here is science, because if we don't do it, somebody else will. Because you cannot stop technology.
We're not your technology.
Let me vaporize his ass.
I broke the code. I own your whole genome.
The world will know what you're doing here.
The world? The world will approve. We can make you now. Don't you get it? We don't need you.
So when he says we don't need you anymore, the esoteric meaning behind that is what the elite are basically trying to form with their one world religion, which will inevitably enable them to bring about this whole transhumanism technology. And that is that they want people to reject God, and they want to paint God in a negative light, and they want to portray God as a bad guy and somebody that we don't need. And that is an extremely Luciferian point of view. And you'll see in this scene an extreme example of how they are trying to portray God, or in the movie's terminology, our creators, in a negative light. They want to make God the bad guy.
I'm slave to no one.
All this species mixing with species. It upsets the cosmic balance. The creators, they don't like it. They built you to do what you were told.
Now here's the thing. A big component to this whole transhumanism agenda is to convince the population that we can evolve and achieve a higher plane.
Well, what do you think? I think history is about to change.
They have to convince people that believing in God is nonsense. They desperately need you to believe that evolution is scientific fact, because without that as a foundation, there is no reason for us to assume that there is any higher level that we can achieve as human beings. They also need you to believe that there is no afterlife, so that you will continue to flee from death and fear death, so much so that you will give up almost anything to prolong your life. Now don't worry, this movie also factors that into this whole transcendence agenda. And they reinforce these concepts that have been drilled into your mind time and time and time again. Things like the age of the dinosaurs, the Jurassic period, if you will, where all the dinosaurs on Earth died off to make way for the life forms that we see on Earth today. And again, they reinforce this whole idea of carbon dating.
You know that story we were all told as children about a giant asteroid that struck the Earth millions of years ago and wiped out the dinosaurs?
Vaguely.
We were wrong. This metal caused the Great Extinction. How and why I can't yet say, but carbon dating puts it at 65 million years BC. This ore you've got us digging for is a lot more dangerous than you think, and my people...
Darcy, I think that you've been out in the field for far too long. Why don't we discuss dinosaurs over dinner? Ribs?
Not a chance.
You have no idea what's been happening here. We're about to make the quantum leap.
And it's all a ruse, guys. The fact is, evolution is as much a belief as any other religion. It was a religion before Darwin, and it is still a religion today. Yes, there are pieces of the evolution model that are based on science, actual, observable, testable science. But those exact same pieces also apply to the creation model, and you have been severely duped your entire life to believe that evolution is scientific fact, and the only reason that they are pushing this agenda so much is because it is crucial for you to believe in evolution so that you reject God, you flee from death, and you accept the transcendence agenda. And that's not even getting into the morality issues with the evolution theory and the open door to things like racism that theory allows. But anyway, this movie just again takes this concept that man can ascend above God and simply applies it to the evolution / transcendence agenda. It's about the mark of the beast, guys. It's about manipulating our genetics so that we are no longer in God's image, but in man's own image. And just take a look at this scene in the movie where they're talking about this seed, which on an exoteric level has to do with panspermia, where life began on Earth due to an outside alien intervention. But on an esoteric level, it's talking about Satan's or Lucifer's seed.
Wait, the seed?
Those nasty soldiers that were chasing us. I saw on board the ship and they took something that they called the seed.
Listen, 60 million years ago, give or take an eon,
Thousands of planets were cyberformed with seeds.
Then of course, again, they try and take it one step further by on an exoteric level talking about the so-called extinction of the dinosaurs, but on an esoteric level are describing the global flood, and again painting God as a bad guy.
They turned your organic life into our elemental metals. Our creators destroyed your world.
Now what's also interesting is that at various points throughout this movie they reference esoterically and subtly the fifth age. And they even tell you that when you try and play God, it doesn't always work out how you think it's going to.
This is the 5th iteration. Why does it keep turning out like this?
It's just some bugs in the final render.
I modeled Galvatron after Optimus Prime. Why does he keep looking like Megatron?
The rendering sequence is almost finished.
Simple coding. Algorithms! Math! Why can't we make what we want to make the way we want to make it? Why?
The veil is lifting. These secrets are being revealed to us. And despite what little truth does get through the cracks, they will always end up slanting what little truth there is in order to fit their ultimate goals.
There are no good aliens or bad aliens, Jaeger. It's just us and them. And you chose them.
Anytime.
Don't forget what this is all really about.
Judgment Day.
And in the very last scene of the movie, you can see how they tie all of this back together. Remember, when they are talking about the seed, they are talking about the corruption of man. And the corruption of man comes from manipulating one's genetics. They also esoterically make it obvious that these Transformers are fallen angels. And then lastly, they make one final point to make God or the creators seem like the bad guy.
This seed belongs to our creators, whoever they are. There remains a price on my head. I endanger you all if I stay. I shall take it where it can never be found.
Will we ever see you again?
Cade Yeager, I do not know. But whenever you look to the stars, think of one of them as my soul. Defend this family, Autobots, as they have you. Defend all they can be. There are mysteries to the universe we were never meant to solve. But who we are and why we are here are not among them. Those answers we carry inside. I am Optimus Prime, and this message is to my creators. Leave planet Earth alone.
And there you go, guys. That's the esoteric meaning of Transformers in a nutshell. It is about Saturn worship and fallen angels. And these movies were specifically put in this order to expose you to these concepts without you ever realizing it. The first movie introduces you to the concept of the cube. The second movie shows the relationship between Transformers and these gateways. The third movie takes you through those gateways. And the fourth movie combines it all together into the idea of transcendence. This is all about getting people to believe that they can ascend above God and become God-like themselves, whether they consciously believe this or not. Transformers is propaganda for the elite to brainwash the masses and to push their agendas. When you sit back and turn off your brain and watch these movies without ever questioning what's on the screen, you think you're being entertained, but you're actually being brainwashed. That's the point of this. And it's not just these movies. It's just about everything that comes out of Hollywood. So be wise, brothers and sisters. Pray for discernment. Keep searching for the truth. If you got something out of this video, please like this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And if you would share this video, I would really appreciate it, guys. And with that said, thanks and God bless.